Honorable Speaker, I want to say that if this country has to transform in line with Vision 2030, I think a number of sectors need to improve the way they respond and act towards the SMEs. In this particular case, I want to look at those who receive services, and then especially from the people in the SMEs. And the payment for these services has been a big challenge, especially by the county government. Honorable Speaker, I want to say that as the committee continues to look onto ways to improve the financing of SMEs, we also need to look at the way the people who receive the services from SMEs handle them in terms of their payments. I think this is a major loophole that is frustrating the youth, that's frustrating the people with disabilities in the rural areas who are attempting to try to contribute to the national economy, and yet they are not being assisted through the developed systems. Mr. Speaker, I support.
The Honorable Russell, member for Saku.
Standing. I didn't expect.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I thank the Chair for Finance for this bill, and she eloquently presented it. Mr. Speaker, if we must grow the economy, many Kenyans should be able to borrow money, pay taxes, and do business. The experience that we are getting with the Chinese who are doing business in Kenya, actually we are told that their banks in their home countries actually are guaranteeing loans. They are getting money from their government. And that is why they are able to do much more business in our country than our own countrymen and women. I think this bill will go in the right direction. Finally, it is about safeguard for this money, because for many years, Kenyans have borrowed money and they have not been able to return this money. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Sangok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, and it seems the new chairman of Finance, Honorable Gladys Wanga, have started in a high voltage. In fact, she have started with what we call economy recovery after the COVID-19, post-COVID-19, because after COVID-19, we will realize that so many SMEs will crumble. But with such guarantees that the government will guarantee loans to the youth, persons with disability, and women who traditionally do not have assets. Some of them don't have title deeds to be able to guarantee themselves to get loans. So, Honorable Speaker, this is an idea which is very nice, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, but I want to caution the Treasury, the Ministry of Finance or Treasury, Honorable Speaker, so that this one will not be like the access to government procurement opportunity by the three category of the marginalized groups or the affirmative action group, Honorable Speaker. Because you realize in the ACPO, access to government procurement opportunity, those tenders allocated to youth, women, and persons with disability, Honorable Speaker, have been tenders that will not give any economic empowerment to the youth or to the person with disability, because they give them, they reserve tenders of supply of toothpick, supply of toilet papers, supply of newspapers to that category. And the big mega tenders are set aside to those who are known or those who are who in the society. So I hope the guarantee will be equitable. It will guarantee all persons with disability, women and youth, on equal measures without the basis of who is who, and be regionally balanced so that somebody from Lamu is given a guarantee that somebody from Marsabit is given and somebody from Kisumu. And even if the cabinet secretary comes from a certain region, we like that all regions are treated fairly, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I do support and congratulate Honorable Wanga once again for being the first female chairman of the Committee on Finance, and I'm sure Honorable Mbadi is now
enough.
shaking
That's enough.
because the
Honorable-
gubernatorial race in
The
Homa Bay
Honorable
will be
Sangok, that is
a bit
sufficient.
messy.
We shall have finally the Honorable Wanyonyi, member for Westlands, on this, so that we can close it. The Honorable Wanyonyi, member for Westlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank the committee and the chair for bringing this amendment, Mr. Speaker, especially for giving guarantee to these marginalized groups. What is killing our business people in this country, Mr. Speaker, is lack of access to a cheap and accessible credit. And this guarantee will enable them to access this credit that they can enable them to do business. So this is a very good amendment. We support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable members, so that we can make progress, allow me to put the question. I have confirmed that the House is properly constituted for purposes of making this decision. I therefore put the question, which is that the Public Finance Management Amendment number 2, Bill National Assembly Bill number 23 of 2020, be now read a third time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 10, the County Law Compliance and Enforcement Bill, Senate Bill number 25 of 2018, second reading.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek your indulgence to combine my statement with number 10, order number 10 and 11, because the answer is the same.
Very well. Chairperson, I give you leeway
Okay, thank
to
you.
do that so that we can deal with those.
Thank you, Chair. The Senate Bill number 27 and number 25, both of them, when they were remitted to the House, to my committee, there was no report on public participation. Consequently, we moved the clerk to advertise for public participation on 11th March this year and 30th June this year, respectively. And this has been done. No reports on public participation and no response has been received by my committee. Consequently, the committee will sit now to consider these two bills and then give a report to this House. So I'm asking for 2 weeks to enable my committee to deliberate and give a report to this House. And again, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, this is my first time I'm representing my committee in this House. I wish to thank the leadership of the House, the Speaker, and everybody, my colleagues, for bestowing this responsibility to us, to me and my committee, my vice chair of the committee. Secondly, let me thank the previous chair, Honorable Cheptumo, for steering the committee for the last 2 years or so. And finally, I want to assure, and this allay fears expressed by, I think, my colleague the other day, member for Alego, was alluding to age. And I want to remind him, like, in terms relating to a committee like this, the older you are, I can assure him, the more experience and wisdom obtains. I can give an example of those of us who know a late judge called Lord Denny, so famous even parliamentary circles that at 87, when he retired, as a British judge, he was the greatest judge perhaps in the Commonwealth in the last century. When he retired at 87, that is the time he was giving the very best equitable judgments. So I will allay those fears that my committee, which, and they are so capable members, senior members of this House, who have been assigned to my committee, I think we shall deliver, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
Congratulations, Chair, new Chair for Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. And indeed, the Speaker is well versed with Lord Denning, Master of the Rolls. He of the famous quote of whatever dwelleth in a man's mind. Chair, you remember that? Only the devil. You do.
I feel flattered.
It is an onerous task that you have, but we are confident that your shoulders are sufficient to shoulder the duty that this particular committee is called upon to shoulder for this country. We are confident. Your reasons for seeking a deferment are sufficient and good. I therefore agree that the business that is listed as order number 10 and number 11 to be deferred, and therefore we shall move to the next business. I have heard the voice of the Honorable Amalwa, Chris, member for Kiminini, on a point of order. Proceed, Chris.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek your indulgence pertaining this matter that Honorable J.B. Muturi, who I know very well, have the capacity and the capability to lead that committee. This goes back to the House Business Committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these extraordinary times, and indeed last time we agreed that the bill should not come to second reading
The
without
Honorable
the public
Chris
participation
Wamandwa,
report.
which business are you speaking to?
The same one, the one
No,
he
no,
has
no,
requested for
but-
deferment.
No, Honorable Chris, you know the rules. That horse has fled. I've already deferred that
Okay.
business. So just hold your horses until it comes again, then you may have a bite at it. We'll move to the next business. Order number 12. Yes.
Order number 11, the Preservation of Human Dignity and Enforcement of Economic and Social Rights Bill, Senate Bill number 27 of 2018, second reading.
I believe that the same ruling that I have delivered on number 10 applies to this one, so the business stands deferred. Next business.
Order number 12, motion, inquiry into the status of dams in Kenya.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House adopt the report of the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on its inquiry on the status of dams in Kenya, laid on the table of this House on Thursday, October 17, 2019. Mr. Speaker, the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, pursuant to Standing Order number 21 to 216.5A, embarked on the inquiring on the status of dams in Kenya. This was necessitated, Mr. Speaker, by the fact that there were various dams projects across the country which have been allocated funds year after year. And Mr. Speaker, the committee set out to establish the status of these dams against the resources allocated. Mr. Speaker, in the course of the inquiry, the committee held meetings with the Cabinet Secretary for Water and Sanitation, the chief executive officers of various water agencies, which were formerly called water service boards, from across the country. The committee also conducted inspection visits to various dams projects across the country to assess the status. The committee visited the following dams: Itare Dam, which has already stored; Semsusu Dam, which is completed; Northern Corrector Tunnel; Karumeno 2 Dam, which is ongoing; Dwakwe Dam, which is ongoing; and Uma Dam, which stored many years ago, as well as Mwache Dam, which is awarded but not yet commenced. Mr. Speaker, the committee also sought for written submission for other dams across the country to understand the progress made so far. The committee wrote to the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation, the National Treasury, the Rift Valley Water Works Development Authority, the Earth Water Works Development Authority, seeking for additional information on various water projects being implemented. Mr. Speaker, the committee inquiry into status of dams in Kenya was guided by the following objectives. One, to conduct physical inspection to establish the status and progress of works for dams to be visited. Two, to identify any discrepancies that may be notable between the paperwork, the paper reports, and the actual physical situation on the ground. Number three, to establish the reasons for the slow progress of the construction of dams in the country. Number four, to recommend effective implementation strategies for the construction of the dams. And finally, Mr. Speaker, to report on specific recommendations on the way forward for the ongoing projects and the stalled ones. Mr. Speaker, during the inquiry, the committee noted that the construction of various dams project was slow, and this was attributed to a number of factors, which included inadequate financial resource, primarily counterpart funding, inefficient and costly financing models, and unsettled resettlement action plan issues. It was further observed that various dams projects financial commitment had been done before acquisition of the project land. This led to the delays in the implementation of the projects and huge costs in idle time and equipment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee further noted that whereas substantial resources were committed to construction of mega dams across the country, there were no plans in place to ensure that the last mile connectivity was achieved. A case to illustrate this problem, Mr. Speaker, is Msusu Dam in Baringo County, which was completed in the year 2014, and it took 5 years to have the last mile connectivity initiated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee also observed that the National Treasury was engaging foreign private commercial banks to borrow money to finance the project. This is a matter of great concern, considering that these loans came with high interest rates, costly insurance requirement, and disclosed negotiation fees and other hidden costs. The resultant effect, Mr. Speaker, is that these loans were more times more expensive than the usual concessional loans, which are usually negotiated with church private institutions are likely to charge, thereby making the loan facilities very exorbitant. Mr. Speaker, it was also noted that the procurement process and construction of most of these dams were carried out under the engineering, procurement, construction and financing scheme, ECPF, Mr. Speaker, model. In this financing model, Mr. Speaker, the contractor is not only responsible for engineering, procuring, and constructing the project, but was also responsible for financing it. The contractor, Mr. Speaker, does all the preliminary works of the geotechnical investigation, interpretation, final designs, and eventually the actual construction of the dam. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, this model is more or less single sourcing, and therefore may be prone to abuse, and value for money may not be effectively realized. Mr. Speaker, it was further observed that the ministry had constructed various dams, such as Msusu Dam, Kiserian Dam, Maruba Dam, through GOK funding. This indicated that with the proper planning, siting, management and monitoring, project implemented through local funding could be more cost-effective than through external borrowing. Mr. Speaker, there is therefore need for government to fund its project from feasibility study, initial design, land acquisition process, and the final designs until project implementation phase through exchequer funding. Mr. Speaker, the committee also noted that there was need for proper public participation and engagement before the implementation of dams, projects so as to ensure that the need of the local communities are factored in at the project implementation stage. Mr. Speaker, it was further observed that Itare Dam, thus stored as the project contractor CMC in the Ravina, had filed for bankruptcy proceeding in Italy. Consequently, there was equipment that included bulldozers, excavators, and other equipment, Mr. Speaker, which are lying idle or worth more than billions Kenya shillings in the site, Mr. Speaker. In addition, there are other equipment which are still there and which are rotting on site, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all this plant and equipment was part of what was purchased using money and advanced to the contractor by the government of Kenya. And in the event that this equipment is left in disuse, this would be a direct loss to the public funds, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation, together with the National Treasury, was engaging the contractor, that is the Itare Dam contractor, to ensure that the project implementation was not affected by the bankruptcy proceeding in Italy. Mr. Speaker, it was also observed that the contractor had performance board and advance payment guarantees that were almost expiring. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, there was need to review the contract to ensure that Itare Dam, which is in Nakuru County, project implementation continues to completion. Mr. Speaker, the committee further observed the government needed to come up with inter-ministerial approach at the design stage of the project so as to reduce the delays resulting from leave at the implementation stage. Mr. Speaker, the committee having engaged various stakeholders and having visited various dams construction sites, the committee consequently recommend that the government should, as a matter of priority, first and foremost, acquire land for the construction of dam long before the project implementation and before making any financial commitment with donors and other development partners to avoid huge costs that accompany delay in the implementation stage, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realize that the government is going ahead to signing contracts with the various contractors, but yet, Mr. Speaker, the government has not acquired land to site these particular dams, Mr. Speaker, leading to serious idle times, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, where full acquisition of land for a dam project is not possible, for one reason or another, the committee recommended that at least the land for construction of dam wall must be available before any funding negotiations are initiated. Mr. Speaker, the committee also recommends that the National Treasury and the line ministries should forthwith stop implementing any new project through ECPF model of financing due to high costs associated with this model. Mr. Speaker, the government should ensure that the financing model considered for project implementation are efficient, cost-effective, and give value for money to Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, the bilateral loans charged from the African Development Bank, from the World Bank, loans benefits outweighs the commercial loans procured through ECPF model, whose costs are bound to be exorbitant due to hidden costs. And Mr. Speaker, this is in public domain, arising from what we have had in Kimwalel and other dams in the country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation, together with the National Treasury, should urgently put in place measures to have the works for the construction of Itare Dam as subcontracted or assigned to another contractor so as to forestall the huge loss that may be incurred if the plant equipment that are currently on site remain unused for a long time. Otherwise, they should terminate the contract, Mr. Speaker, before the expiry of the performance board guarantee. Mr. Speaker, at the same time, the National Treasury should encourage the line ministries to implement projects with the proper management and monitoring to the last phase utilizing local resources, as was the case in Semsusu and Kiserian Dam. Further, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury should ensure there is adequate funding for such locally funded projects to avoid stalling. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation, through its implementing agencies, should ensure that the proper background checks on contractor is done before being awarded the contract. Further, upon engagement of the contractor, the consultant should do continuous due diligence to ensure the financial capacity of the contractor has not shifted in the course of the project life. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation should through its implementing agency, should ensure better monitoring of dams' technical, financial, and economic performance, considering the huge financial outlays involved. This will enhance project implementation with minimal delays and idle time. Mr. Speaker, the national government, through the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, should develop collaborative framework between the national and the county government to ensure sustainable resource management. Mr. Speaker, the government, through its ministries, should ensure that interministerial approach and the project design stage to ensure that the relevant ministries are made aware of the way leave requirements, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you find that the government has procured contractors, yet
the Chair, I'm sure you are not, you must be alive to the resolution that the House made on 28th, that in moving this kind of report, you have only 10 minutes. But I will allow you to finish because you are the Chair and you are the first one who's been caught up with this new resolution of the House. Just complete in the next 2-3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I just want to conclude by saying that the government should be able, various government agencies to be able to work together. Because, Mr. Speaker, we realize that some of these dams are sited within the forest. And, Mr. Speaker, we realize that the ministry, like the Minister of Water, moves ahead, secure the contractors, yet at the same time, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry does not be able to give relief for some of these projects to be undertaken within the forest, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee finally recommended that the Office of the Auditor General should, within 6 months, upon the adoption of this report, undertake the performance audit of all the dam projects that have been implemented through ECPF model to assess the cost-benefit analysis, completion rate of the project, and viability of this model in the future, with a view of establishing whether there is value for money for expenditure of the public resource incurred under the model. Mr. Speaker, the committee is thankful to the offices of the Speaker and that of the clerk for giving us this opportunity to execute this investigation. And Mr. Speaker, having said that, I beg to move and call upon the Honorable Francis Chachu to second this motion. I thank you.
The member for North Hall, Honorable Chachu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to second this report. Mr. Speaker, sir, I second the report of the Financial Committee of Environment and Natural Resources or the inquiry into the status of dams in this republic. Mr. Speaker, sir, the dam is critical water infrastructure in our nation. In 2016, over 13 million Kenyans not have access to clean water or adequate sanitation. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, Kenya being a water-scarce nation, government can only alleviate this critical need by investing in such critical water infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, sir, dams are critical infrastructure in development and management of water resources. It enables water supply. It's necessary for flood control, for irrigation, for navigation, for water quality, for sediment control, production of clean energy, among others. So, Speaker, sir, in addition, dams are major assets in climate change mitigation. It enhances water storage. It also enables us to produce clean energy in terms of geothermal. So, Speaker, sir, as a committee, we noted that there were about 24 dams under construction when we did the inquiry. 2 dams in particular failed. This is Badasa and Uma. So, Speaker, sir, I want to note that Badasa Dam, as a case study of a failed dam, failed because this dam was designed to fail from the beginning. And this dam costed Kenyans 2.3 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, sir, even though we had experts in dam construction, we even had...
The Honorable Chachu,
yes.
do I hear you stating on record?
Yes.
And second, that particular dam, which one did you say?
Badasa Dam in Marsabit
Badasa
County
was designed to fail.
Yes, I clearly and categorically said that, Mr. Speaker, sir. It was designed to fail from the outset. Mr. Speaker, sir, this dam had project consulting engineers and a panel of dam experts to support the technical work of this dam. Mr. Speaker, sir, this expertise, which we invested in from the outset, could not even get the design of the dam right from the beginning. Mr. Speaker, sir, there was a major design flaw noted right at the conception of this dam. The design flaw and delay in reviewing the original design costed the taxpayers additional 1 billion shillings in variation cost. Mr. Speaker, sir, clearly it was designed to fail from the outset, and I largely think this is due to corruption in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, unfortunately, this dam, up to today, is a stalled project. And this is almost 8 or 9 years ago. Mr. Speaker, sir, we made some observations as a committee. The dams in this country are largely very expensive. In Morocco and Uganda, in Morocco, the dams can be constructed for half this cost. Again, a serious element of corruption. So, Speaker, sir, there was skewed distribution of dams projects across Kenya. Some very deserving counties, areas, especially in northern Kenya, were not even considered. Even though, as of now, there are few ongoing, and we appreciate. So, Speaker, sir, due diligence were not done. Some dams, some companies, which were actually bankrupt and declared bankrupt in Italy, were actually given this work. If the due diligence were done, this could not have happened. Mr. Speaker, sir, government was making financial commitments in billions of money before they even secured land for the dam construction. There are other considerations and other factors at play, not necessarily because of the dam. Mr. Speaker, sir, I strongly urge the government, Ministry of Water and Sanitation, to create a Directorate of Dam Engineering. This will spearhead all the dam projects from conceptualization through geotechnical works to design and supervision. If these are done, if this institution is in place, Mr. Speaker, sir, dams like Badasa and Uma will not be designed to fail from the outset. This is a solution to that critical need. Mr. Speaker, sir, clearly we were not able to assess through our inquiry or through our investigation whether actually Kenyans were getting value for their money. So, Speaker, sir, most of these dams were in billions of money, 24 billion, 34 billion, and even more and more. And most of them were external funding. They were evading, actually, taxpayers' money or our exchequer to fund these dams. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I can categorically say that there were serious elements of corruption in management, construction, and design of those dams from the outset. And I hope EACC, DCI, and others will do the necessary work to unearth the realities and ensure that Kenyans get value for their money. I support, Mr. Speaker, sir. I second, Mr. Speaker, sir. I second.
The Honorable Chachu, I hope that you are... But allow me to propose the question. That this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on an inquiry into the status of dams in Kenya, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, October 17, 2019. The Honorable Chachu, I hope your submissions on that, and of course with the concurrence of your chair and your committee, will find its way to the Public Accounts Committee of this House, so that an inquiry into those very serious assertions that you have made on this floor can be properly investigated. Because if billions of shillings in the amounts that are detailed in this report were somehow allowed to fall into the cracks of that incompleted dam, you said it is called Badasa. And Badasa, then there must be government functionaries who must be held to account for that. The first person who has showed interest in this is the Honorable Mboi, member for Kathiani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this report by the committee and wish to begin by saying that, the issue of dams is something that we really need to take seriously because dams deal with issues of water and water is life. Mr. Speaker, normally when the rains are heavy, a lot of times you find our constituents complaining about the condition of roads. And then soon after the rains are over, they will start complaining about hunger. But if we are able to set up dams all over the country in a proper manner, then we would be able to deal with the issue of hunger, which is basically one of those projects that the government has set out to ensure it achieves. But Mr. Speaker, there are several problems that I have noted, and listening to the chair, I think they seem to have a proper report that captures the issues that Kenyans have noted about the dams that we have in this country. The first one, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of the cost. Many times when you look at the cost implication on the dams that are set up, starting from the mega dams even up to the smaller ones, there seems to be always an element of inflated costs. And Mr. Speaker, that is why you find that a lot of corruption actually does go into projects that are involved with dams. For example, the one recently that was in, I think, Elgeyo Marakwet of Kimwarer, and another one of Aro, where even the people where the dams were to be set up did not even know. Even the land on which the dams were to be built, they had not been given the land, but yet money had already started being spent. So it's really important that we figure out a way by which we can bring down the costs so that they are fair, and then we ensure that people and Kenyans get value for money. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, is the speed of construction of these dams. And I want to say that dams being done by government agencies are actually very slow compared to the ones that are done by NGOs, because we have dams all over the place done by NGOs and those done by government. How come when an NGO is doing a dam, it takes a very short time? Within no time, people start benefiting from that project. But Kenyan agencies will do a dam for year in, year out. We would run it for years and years. People keep hearing of a dam called Thwake from I don't know which year. And we continue talking about it every year. And our people down there are expecting that when they hear a project of government, within a year, they can start benefiting from that project. So it's important that we note that the speed of construction has to be dealt with. Mr. Speaker, the other issue is, the other problem I've noted is fairness in the distribution of these dams, particularly government-funded ones. It is important that every part of Kenya requires dams. Even though we know that some places are hard-pressed for water, it is important to note that every part of Kenya actually also is involved in paying of taxes, and therefore no area should be segregated or left behind when it comes to the issue of provision of dams. So I think that is one of the things that the ministry needs to look at. It doesn't have to be based on who goes to the ministry offices more than who. It has to be just fair that if there is money for dams, let us be sure that we are giving every area, every region, its fair share. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's also a bit of a confusion in who is it that is given this responsibility to set up dams in this country. We know that water is devolved to the county governments, but the national government, through its various agencies, you find various agencies doing similar projects. A dam in one corner is built by one agency, another corner is another agency. I think it's important that all this is coordinated under one agency in the national government and then, of course, the county government. And finally, Mr. Speaker, when we do these dams, I think it's important to ensure security. And one of the things I've noted in the recent past, I've actually lost 3 of my constituents through drowning. Because dams are put up and then, unfortunately, they are not properly secured. So it's one of the things that the committee needs to deal with to ensure that all dams are secured, especially at this time when our children are not in school. In fact, about a week ago, I lost a young man from 3 because he went to swim in the dam and he doesn't know how to swim. He doesn't understand the depth. So unfortunately, he lost his life just because this dam was put up for the good intention of ensuring people can irrigate their farms. Unfortunately, it wasn't secured, so he accessed it and he lost his life. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the committee and I think this is a great opportunity for us to discuss this issue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall we have Honorable Iringo Kubai?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to air my views on this motion, which I stand to support, and thank the committee for having brought such a detailed report on dams in Kenya. And despite that, the report is not really exhaustive because they touched on a few of them, but there are so many other dams in this country which are either stored or they have been done and nothing, they have not benefited the people as it was supposed to be. Mr. Speaker, many of our resources in this country go to the waste because of poor planning. Not even in the dams alone. When you find that any project which is undertaken in Kenya is unfortunate, you find that so much money is used compared to other countries, and at the end of the day, we don't reap what really was supposed to be got from the project. Even roads, Mr. Speaker, putting up a road in Kenya, 1 kilometer of tarmac, cost more than twice some other countries, Ethiopia and other countries, Mr. Speaker. I don't know where we went wrong. Now, when you come to dams, Mr. Speaker, a dam is supposed to be constructed, water collected, and that water is put into proper use, either for irrigation, either for animals, or either for domestic use, or any other use, Mr. Speaker. But then if we go and dig build a dam in let's say in a forest, you clear the whole forest of indigenous trees so that you can do a dam, and that dam will never benefit anybody. Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate. I have an example in mind, Mr. Speaker. There's a dam in my constituency called the Ura Dam. It is in the Nyambene forest. That dam was built in almost 1 square kilometer of land. And a lot of indigenous trees were felled in the Nyambene forest for the purpose of putting up the dam. The dam was done, everything was done, and to date, I think 4 years down the line, not a drop of water has ever collected in that dam, because the way it was set, the river which was supposed to feed that dam has never been directed to that dam, the Ura River. And therefore, it is just a white elephant. There are so many even water pans, Mr. Speaker. Water pans are dug in our arid areas, especially in my constituency, but they are never serviced. Once the rains, they are filled with silt and they flatten again. And all the efforts are just go to the drain. Mr. Speaker, we need to revisit our priorities, especially when it comes to these projects. Proper feasibility study is done, proper funding is done, and more so, the extent of the usage or where that water is going to be collected, and who will be benefiting from it. We cannot go just digging a dam here, another one there, another one there, and it is not helping anybody, Mr. Speaker. And this money is just taxpayers' money. This money is just supposed to do even other things. Security, as one of my colleagues has mentioned, Mr. Speaker, they are very dangerous when we dig these big dams or the water pans. They are just left without nothing to secure them, and it becomes very risky for the children, even passers-by, to slip and fall into those dams, Mr. Speaker. So when a project is done, let it be done properly from A to Z. Where it will be done, if the land has been acquired, if it is public land, what benefits, whatever the indigenous trees which are removed there, which will be more beneficial, is it the dam or the trees we are removing, and even securing the same, Mr. Speaker. And that is why now, most of the time, you find that when you talk of now Kenyan companies being given these works to do, we are letting ourselves down because foreigners are doing it better than us. And therefore, it becomes just, ridiculous that we ourselves, we cannot do things for ourselves in the correct way and honorably and prudently, but foreigners are doing it for us. And that's what we find that now we complain that the youth are not being given work, the women are not given work, the disabled are not given work, the hustlers, the people who don't have a lot of resources are not being given work. But when you get that work, you don't do it, Mr. Speaker. We have even problem with the electricity, Mr. Speaker. Rural Electrification Authority.
Honorable Iringo, the clerk, please just make sure you remember to alert the members when their time is gone. Honorable Iringo, your time is gone.
Chair, I was not alerted.
Well, I'll give you 1 minute, but you have taken your 5 minutes. But please conclude that thought.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you have said, Mr. Speaker, I was not alerted, and thank you for that one. I was mentioning the rural electrification, Mr. Speaker, whereby briefcase companies are being given this work just to erect posts to give people power. It takes 3-4 years, and nothing is happening. So you just see poles, you see wires, you see a transformer, but there's no power. But when you follow the contractor who was doing it, they don't have offices, they don't have where you can get them, they don't know even where the place was. They just sent some quacks to do for them, but they run there and get money, Mr. Speaker. This is very unfortunate for this country, and it should end in due course, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important matter. First, I want to thank the committee for having visited Thwake Dam, which is in Makueni constituency, and for also having visited other dams and given a very good report here, Mr. Speaker. Luckily for us, and the committee was very helpful, Mr. Speaker, when it came on ground. There is some progress on Thwake Dam. It is now at least a third of the dam, close to 40% have been done, and the money is so far worked for is commensurate to that, Mr. Speaker. Although there has been complaints as to local not benefiting from the dam, local contractors and the local people, we are hopeful that once Thwake Dam is over, we'll be able to produce electricity, and most parts of Kitui, Makueni, Machakos and Kajiado, upon construction of Konza City, will be able to get water for irrigation. And Mr. Speaker, this is progress. But we have challenges, Mr. Speaker. Currently, the money is allocated to this dam is 5 billion shillings this financial year, Mr. Speaker. If we do so, then it will take many, many years to complete the dam. We need a double allocation, Mr. Speaker, if we have to complete this dam by 2022, Mr. Speaker. And again, also when the monies have been allocated and contractors have worked, it is increasingly becoming very difficult to get the monies moved from Treasury, from African Development Bank, and from the Ministry of Water to the contractors and to the grassroots. And I'm happy to work with the Ministry of Water and also the Ministry of Treasury to make sure that Thwake Dam is taken care of and is funded on time, so that, Mr. Speaker, we don't have frustration on the ground, and especially on these corona days. One of the companies which has been troublesome there is called JTG, Mr. Speaker. And at times, because they have not been paid on time, they have problems with paying their workers, they have machinery which is broken down, and that's really wasting on time. Recently, the Minister for Water visited the dam, and the condolences to our family. I'm doing my level best to make sure whatever now she proposed to the leadership there and to the contractor is implemented, so that although we have reduced workers during the corona days, they can be brought back, there can be gender, we can take care of youth and local people, so that they can be able to get some of the contracts which befit them, and that the project can be completed as soon as possible, and we are looking forward to that. But, Mr. Speaker, I must talk about the corruption which has been going on with the dams, and which I want to agree with your sentiments that Uman Dam, which is in Kitui County, and Baldesa Dam, I guess that's the right pronunciation, investigations have to be done, because a lot of money has been stolen through dams, and people have walked away with it. Some have gone back for election using the same money, have been elected, and are just thumping that no one can take them anywhere. We have a Public Accounts Committee, we have ESCC. This money must be recovered from these thieves and be brought back to the nation, so that it can be utilized, Mr. Speaker, for the proper purpose. Now that you see a lot of sobriety in the floor of this House, Mr. Speaker, we can now do business seriously, Mr. Speaker, and all government institutions are free to work. And the people who have stolen from government coffers should be held accountable, Mr. Speaker, and especially from this report. We hope that is going to be implemented. PAC will take action, and PIC and ESCC, Mr. Speaker, the DPP, and also the office of DCI, Mr. Speaker, without fear or favor, so that we can recover what has been stolen, and we can now begin afresh to make sure that no one in the future dares steal from dams. And if we were to irrigate our country as it was originally proposed by the government, Mr. Speaker, I believe we'll be doing better than Israel. When Israelis came here to help us, and they are doing a lot of work, Mr. Speaker, in Gulalu, Galana, and now Thwake Dam will provide constant flow to control floods. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we must make sure dams which are being constructed, and especially these mega ones where billions of shillings have been spent, there's no fault, because once they crack or there is a mistake or the water washes people downstream, we have no mechanism other than to sue some people or prosecute them. We have to make sure that proper science and engineering is used to make sure that, Mr. Speaker, these dams don't break down. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the government of Kenya for the project of Thwake Dam, and I'm looking forward to local.
Honorable Robert Pukose.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to this report. On the onset, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the Chair and the Committee on Environment on having worked tirelessly with the support of the Office of the Speaker to ensure that this report is done and done well. It's a good report on the onset. It is looked on various areas. And when you look at issues, Honorable Speaker, that have been raised on this report, issues of even doing the checks, issues of making sure that even the contractors that are supposed to be given work to do must be able to be have the capacity to be able to deliver. Unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, in this case, you find that this Italian company, which was facing issues of bankruptcy, the company, unfortunately, I think whether the consultant slept on his job, or it is the government that slept on its job, or once people had gotten their kickbacks, now it was as Honorable Judge Okanya put it, at times it is designed at initial for that dam to fail. And you see, when people engage in that kind of thing with engineers who have gone through various training, that you are able, you design something to fail, and I think it's a very immoral thing. And Honorable Speaker, with the recommendations of the committee, we are hoping that the ESCC, the DCI, should be able to make arrests, prosecute, and we have the recovery of even the assets from this. You look at the equipment which is at Itare Dam, the equipment worth billions of money. And you know, there is something called disuse. When something is, you know, even a vehicle is supposed to be running on the road. If you park your vehicle for a long time without it being on the road, other things will fail. You will have failure from the, failure from even the battery itself. Just a simple thing like that. But there will be other failures within that. And with an equipment worth billions of money lying idle at Itare, and this has cost the taxpayer, I think it is something that those who are charged with the responsibility should be able to make sure that these equipments are saved, they are put into better use. We have other departments, Honorable Speaker, that at times, you look at even our country, we are not at war now. And you have the military that has technical know-how. You have the National Youth Service that have technical know-how. Why can't we be able to utilize these government institutions to make sure that we do something in areas that we can be able to salvage issues? I've worked in Baringo and in TRT constituency. We used to see the army constructing water pans for the locals. So these are things that are able to be done. The army can build bridges, they can build the dams, they can build water pans, and even our National Youth Service. Why are we just giving them works that are not of even their ability? So, Honorable Speaker, I think this is a very good report, and I hope that with the recommendation that the Auditor General, within a period of 6 months, should be, once this House approves this report, the Auditor General should immediately set in, do the audit report, and forward it to the relevant committee of the House, either the PIC or PSC, or even the Special Funds Committee. I think it will be the relevant depending on the Speaker's ruling. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support.
We shall now have Honorable Ibrahim Sahal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this important report of the committee. Mr. Speaker, as a member of the Departmental Committee of Environment and Natural Resource, among other objectives, we set out to establish the status of the dams against the resource allocated. We conducted inspection, visit to Itare Dam, Chomsus Dam, Northern Collector, Tunnel, Kimorer, Tuake, Uma Dam, and Mwache Dam. Mr. Speaker, during the inspection visit as a committee, we noted that the construction of the most of the dams project was slow, and it was attributed to a cross-cutting issues, namely inadequate financial resources, primary counterparts funding, inefficiencies and costly financing models, and unsettled resettlement action plan. Mr. Speaker, on the unsettled resettlement plans, it was observed that various dam project financial commitment had been done before acquisition of projects and land, resulting into implementation delay and the huge cost of construction delayed, with issues of resettlement of persons affected. I support the committee's recommendation that the government should, as much as possible, acquire land for the construction of dams long before the project implementation or making any financial commitment to donors and partners to avoid huge cost of delay implementation and related cost. Mr. Speaker, on efficiency and costly financing models, the committee observed that the procurement model adopted by the National Treasury is in most of the dams under engineering, procurement, construction, and financing scheme, EPC plus F was more or less single sourcing and therefore subject to abuse, and value of money may not be effectively realized. The foreign private commercial loans through EPC plus F model came with high interest rates, costly insurances, requirements, undisclosed negotiation fees, and the hidden cost resulting to the loan facility being very exorbitant. I strongly support the committee's recommendation that the National Treasurer and Line Ministry should therefore stop implementation of projects through. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Honorable Oudo Ojiambo.
Thank you, Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this report. I've had an opportunity to go through the recommendations, number 1 to 13, and I must commend the committee for the wonderful job they did within the constraint of time and technical ability. But nevertheless, as I stand here, Honorable Speaker, I stand from a point of knowledge, having been involved in most or quite a number of these dam projects through preparation of resettlement action plan. And some of the areas highlighted as the point of concern are actually true. One of the greatest challenges that we have had in this country is the process leading to conceptualization of the project all the way to implementation. Many times, the government or implementing agencies start to conceptualize the project without having put aside a budget for land acquisition and resettlement action plan for those people being affected. So you end up, Honorable Speaker, with a project. Yes, there's counterpart funding from the donors, yet there are no local funds to compensate. And of course, Honorable Speaker, as you are aware, the past few years, there has been very many cases in court involving misappropriation of funds or unethical conduct by the people charged with acquiring land for purpose of this dam. But nevertheless, Honorable Speaker, I do believe the government and implementing agencies of at various levels took into considerations the recommendations of the committee. Probably the case of stalled projects, special dam projects, will be a thing of the past. It's a very simple, straightforward model, and as much as they might have issues with the financing model that is being adopted, truth to be told, quite a number of these projects, probably with the proper cost-benefit analysis, they have a positive NPV. If the project is properly structured, then we should be able to have a cost recovery, both direct and indirect. Honorable Speaker, let me also concur with my colleague who said that quite a number of dam projects are designed to fail from the word go. I say this because in my own constituency, there is a small dam under the Lower Nzoia Sector 5 project that was designed literally to fail from the word go. It was designed knowing very well there is no water inflow. The water inflow of the mainstream has dried up because of deforestation and climate change. The engineers and National Irrigation Board designed hoping the water will come from heaven and just fall there. Indeed, water comes, it fills through runoff, it fills, but that water cannot support more than even 100 households. As we stand now, the project has stalled since 2016 without any work being done there. I and Mheshimiwa Bunyasi have been to National Irrigation Board countless number of times, yet nothing happens. We are simply being tossed up and down as if it does not really matter. That's why we need to be very clear that as we design, as we implement these dam projects, there must be adequate technical studies. Some of these people, designers sitting in the offices, probably using outdated Google Maps to design projects, will not take us anywhere. Let them come to the ground, pick details on the ground, talk to the people, because most of them relying on streams or rivers, things change over time. It's the locals who know. So obviously, Honorable Speaker, it's a good report. We sincerely want the government to move with speed, implement these recommendations, because these dams are part of food security program that we intend, that we must have as a country. We must become food sufficient, and these dams are critical. With those few remarks, I support the report.
Shall we now have Honorable Ole Sankok, David?
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And from the onset, I would like to congratulate the committee for coming up with a report that is exhaustive and a report that is well thought about. Honorable Speaker, when discussing the issue of water, I expected this House to be full because water is life, either as drinking water or bathing in it or swimming in it, or even as IV fluids from the doctor, Honorable Speaker, or even through irrigation to our farms, Honorable Speaker. Water is life. So this is a very important report that we should discuss soberly so that we can save our people, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, for a long time, Instead of this water becoming important and a blessing to our people, it has become a curse through run of water during floods, Honorable Speaker, where we have lost a lot of lives and we have lost property because the government is not putting in place measures to mitigate, Honorable Speaker, the adverse effect of climatical change which come with it, with floods and such issues, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, water have ended up destroying our infrastructure because we have not mitigated the effect of this run of water, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, and there are so many ways, and I would like the committee, through the chairman, to approach this issue of dams in various ways, Honorable Speaker. We have mega dams, Honorable Speaker, and equally important are the water pads, Honorable Speaker. Water pads, Honorable Speaker, are equally important. They may be small, Honorable Speaker, and they are less costly, 100,000 for each, Honorable Speaker. So to 23 billion that was wasted in Aror and Kemwaner Dam, Honorable Speaker, could have constructed 230,000 water pads in northern Kenya and part of South Rift, where it is semi-arid area, Honorable Speaker, and could have supported a lot of our citizens, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, and sometimes the government should also be innovative, Honorable Speaker. I remember, Honorable Speaker, in the construction of the Narok Masai Mara Road, Honorable Speaker, we approached as leaders from Narok the contractor, Honorable Speaker, and requested him to scoop Maram, Honorable Speaker, from various farms and scoop in a way that he actually construct some water pads along that road, Honorable Speaker, on private farms. Honorable Speaker, and today along that road we have 152 water pads serving different farms, Honorable Speaker, at no cost at all, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, so our government should be innovative, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have, an Honorable Pukose had said, we have the military, and we are not at war today. And we may not be at war in the near future, Honorable Speaker. We have NYS, Honorable Speaker, with enough machineries, Honorable Speaker, with enough personnel, that is human resource, Honorable Speaker, with adequate human know-how, Honorable Speaker, because there is engineers in the military. There are engineers in NYS, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, why don't we utilize them in constructing? The other day, as a member of the Labor and Social Welfare Committee, we were approached by NYS, and we had a bill in this House, Honorable Speaker, to try and make ways of NYS making money. And that is why we came up with an NYS council, Honorable Speaker, so that they can also venture into commercial activities, Honorable Speaker. One of them was competing with the matatus here in Nairobi in transportation, Honorable Speaker, which is not commercially viable, Honorable Speaker. We should actually have had innovation of them becoming a company, a construction company, so that tenders to build dams, to construct our roads, can be awarded to them, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, because these Chinese companies, if you see them, some of them have the same name, meaning they may be companies of the government from China, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the white elephant projects that were talked by the committee, Honorable Speaker, this country is risking a lot of billions of money through white elephant projects, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the phase 2B of SGR have ended up in a small remote area called Emurtoto, with only one butchery and one shop, Honorable Speaker. Only 12 kilometers to Narok Town. Instead of completing 12 kilometers to Narok Town, so that we can have a catchment.
Very well. Honorable Zankok, I don't know what research you did to know that there is only one butchery where the SGR ends, but or you know one butchery. I'm sure Honorable to know you will be interested to visit the area. Honorable Malwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I've looked at the report. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the report has dealt more of generalities than specifics. The core business of this House, Mr. Speaker, one, is to legislate, to represent, and to oversight. This report, in my own submission, Mr. Speaker, is dealing more on aspects of oversight. If the committee looked at this, Mr. Speaker, and from the word go, they say the projects have been designed to fail, there must be consistency. That is an observation or a conclusion which must be consistent with the recommendation. So the issue is this: who are these people that are culpable? In this report, Mr. Speaker, the committee has denied justice. I expected some specifics, Mr. Speaker. I've been serving on the Committee of Public Investment. And matters of the dam, we have a problem with the Irrigation Board. These people at the Irrigation Board in this report, I expect them to be accountable. But the report, in one way or another, it is shying away from the specifics. It is a generality, Mr. Speaker. They've used the taxpayers' money, Mr. Speaker, and we cannot come here and have a PR report. Mr. Speaker, we've had issues with the dam in Turkana.
Order, Honorable Wamalo. What is it, Honorable Buki? What is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, it is extremely very unfortunate for the Honorable Chris Wamalo to mislead this House. Because, Mr. Speaker, the committee was investigating the dams in generality, so that you can really be able to know why some of these dams have failed. Mr. Speaker, even when we were doing this project, this investigation, National Irrigation Board, which is a rating 2, was not part of our docket, Mr. Speaker. It was in the Committee of Agriculture at that particular time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee has also recommended, upon the adoption of this report, the Auditor General should be able to pick it.
What is out of the Honorable Buki?
Mr. Speaker, what is out of order is Honorable Chris misreading this House in terms of that this committee, it maybe has not read the report the way I'm being told, Mr. Speaker.
Why is Honorable Sankok helping, giving you more issues raised with Honorable Amalwa? But Honorable Buki, it looks like it is a piece of information to Honorable Amalwa that NIB was not under your scope. You seem to have used the point of order door to give him information. Honorable Amalwa.
Mr. Speaker, you can see the chairman is not in charge.
He's
relying on Sangok. I've read the report, Mr. Speaker. I've read the report, Mr. Speaker.
What is out of order, Honorable Noor?
Mr. Speaker, in line with what my chairman has just said, in the contribution of Honorable Wamalwa, whom I respect a lot, Honorable Wamalwa did not go through the whole report, and he's misleading this House in such a manner that if you go through the report, we have recommended that the Director of Investigation to continue, do further investigation.
Honorable Noor, Honorable Noor, you are now gravitating towards contributing, and I'll give you a chance. Let's have Honorable Amalwa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, and you can see the committee is not coordinated. And I'm saying this because I've read the report, Mr. Speaker.
Don't go to
I've read the report. I've read the report. When you are doing an inquiry into the status of the dams, common sense dictates who are the implementers. In this case, Mr. Speaker, you cannot leave the Irrigation Board outside because it's been an implementing agency, Mr. Speaker. And I'm speaking from a knowledgeable perspective that this board, when you go to the dam in Coast, there was one in Mumbai, in Turkana area where the Turkana members of parliament have been complaining. You've just heard also from the members of parliament from Busia complaining. So the implementing agency has been the Irrigation Board. So you cannot carry a study on inquiry and the status of dams in this country without touching on the Irrigation Board. That can be bad ignorance, Mr. Speaker. So the Irrigation Board is critical as far as the issue of dams are concerned. Mr. Speaker, dams play a critical role as far as food security in this country is concerned. When these dams come in place, Mr. Speaker, they are used mostly on purposes of irrigation. Which government agency is in charge of irrigation? It is the Irrigation Board, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we move forward, we don't want to waste taxpayers' money. What I'm putting across, Mr. Speaker, the committee has done good work as far as observation is concerned. And when it comes to report writing, and I'm speaking from even an academic perspective, there must be consistency from the observation, Mr. Speaker. You come to conclusion, then you come to the recommendation. The observations are good. You are saying it was designed to fail. Very good. Conclusion, recommendation. Why are you shying away from touching on this body, Mr. Speaker, which is a government agency? I'm not saying they did bad work, but we need to have consistency as we move on. Mr. Speaker, dams in this country, they have been used as a loophole for corruption. And this is where the Kenyans are losing the taxpayers' money. When it comes to matters of procurement, Mr. Speaker, we've been told it was more of single sourcing. Single sourcing, Mr. Speaker, this is contrary to the public procurement law. There's no value for money. So, in this aspect, there's a conspiracy of matters of corruption so that the public can lose the money. So when such a report comes on this floor of the House, we don't expect generalities. We expect specifics that the agency like the DCI can act on it or the DPP can act on this. You did good observation, but there was shortcoming when it comes to your recommendation, Mr. Speaker. This is what I'm putting across. Because dams in this country, Mr. Speaker, we've heard of Kamwerere Dam, we've heard of these dams in Turkana, we've heard of Budalangi. It has been a loophole for matters of corruption. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to M&E, and I expected this to come in your reports, in matters of projects, there's this project management. Some of these people involved in project management, Mr. Speaker, they need to be trained on matters of project management, on matters of monitoring and evaluation. And this has been another critical problem which you've been facing. I also expected the report to come out and tell us, is the report represented in the face of Kenya? Because it is designed in some regions, and some regions are left out, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to financing, why are we using private commercial banks, which are very expensive, and yet we can use concessional loans, which are cheaper and can give us value for money? So please, the report, you've done very well, but please pull up your socks. There are better things you can do so that you can have teeth for this House to act.
Very well, very well. Let's have Honorable Paul Mwirigi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this report. Mr. Speaker, water is very important in this country. Mr. Speaker, many families in this country suffer a lot by traveling long distances in search of water, whereby there is some of the proposed dams, Mr. Speaker, which are supposed to be constructed by the government in the last 5 to 7 years, Mr. Speaker, and up to now, the dams have not yet commenced. And I would like, Mr. Speaker, according to the report of the Committee of Environment, Mr. Speaker, to concur with them that there is urgency of the Auditor General, Mr. Speaker, to conduct the audit of all the constructed dams within the country, because many of these dams, Mr. Speaker, are stored projects. And these stored projects, Mr. Speaker, were valued at very high rates of money in billions, Mr. Speaker. And the money is lying out there without benefiting any Kenyan person, Mr. Speaker. And there is need, Mr. Speaker, for the Auditor General to take that chance so that at least we can know where the money of those dams, Mr. Speaker, are, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in this country also, we use a lot of money to do this investment of water, Mr. Speaker. But at the long run, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing which you can establish on the ground as far as the benefits for the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, are concerned. So it is good for the government, also when the government is in the process of establishing a dam, Mr. Speaker, in any part of this country, Mr. Speaker, to do due diligence, whereby the visibility study is conducted in good time, the people who are in the land where the dam is supposed to be constructed to be compensated first before the is issued out. Because, Mr. Speaker, in the case of the dams which we are talking about, the tenders were issued even early before the procurement of the lands or before the compensation of the land were done. And this brought a lot of problems in delaying of the commencement of the project, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is need also for the government before establishing this project to work closely with the KFS, Kenya Forestry Service, Mr. Speaker, because when dams are being established in the forest, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of, or there is a problem in accessing these forests, Mr. Speaker, or accessing the sites for the dams, Mr. Speaker, hence delaying the project to be launched or to commence, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also there are supposed to be a framework of the government to work with the local people so that at least they can get the required information from the ground, how the river or the source of the river which they want or where they want to establish the dam, how the river flows, which season maybe that river is in high capacity, Mr. Speaker, so that at least when these dams are being established, Mr. Speaker, they can benefit or they can be of benefit to the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, Gembe South constituency, we have a dam which was supposed to be established in the year 2016, and up to now, that dam has yet to commence. But it is the high time, the Auditor General, to take chance and audit these dams so that at least we can.
Honorable Noor.
Noor. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance. First and foremost, I must first start with thanking the committee members of Environment and Natural Resources who have done a lot and sacrificed many of their times going around this country to look at most of the dams that exist in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee embarked on inquiring into the status of these dams in the country because of many factors and various factors that necessitated for us to look into the dams was because every year we have a budget coming. We pump a lot of resources and a lot of money to dams, and other parts of this country do not have any resources. Like the committee, we approve up to and above 60 billion shillings to these water projects. And there are many parts in this country that did not benefit from the resources. So those are some of the reasons. And the other reason is we had many questions that members of parliament were asking about water in their counties, in their constituencies. And the other reason why we went into was there was a national debate on the dams that were going on in this country. So as a committee, we felt that we needed to inquire into the constructions of those water ponds. And immediately we went to the sites to look into those projects. We felt those projects were taking a longer period, very slow, because of various factors that we needed to highlight so that when next any government ministries are planning for any project, they will be able to put into considerations the recommendation that we were making in our report, Mr. Speaker. Some of the challenges that made this project to take long was, financial challenges that are there. The other thing was the model that was used was very costly, was open-ended, was something that, you cannot at the end of the day touch on it and say that this is the best model that can be used in this country, Mr. Speaker. The other thing was poor planning from the start, Mr. Speaker. In that, you'll see a project that you have gone and negotiated for resources, you have sat with donors and partners, but you do not have the counterpart money from our government to finance that. So that, again, delays the project. The other thing is, you have awarded the project, but you do not have land. There's land crisis, and that gives a challenge for the constructor to go and construct, Mr. Speaker. That is a huge program, a huge problem, resettlement, land allocation. That itself is a nightmare for project implementation. That's why we are saying from the onset, planning of some of the projects are very poorly planned, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had an opportunity to lead a team to go to Morocco to look at the projects, the way they work in Morocco, and the dams that they have constructed. Mr. Speaker, I was shocked with the kind of projects that are implemented in Morocco, the kind of resources they use. It is about 30% of the resources. Yeah? In Kenya, when we have 100%, they use about 30% of what we use. And they complete the whole project, which sometimes is bigger than the project we implement in this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we need, and we have given a recommendation that, Mr. Speaker, we need a directorate in engineering directorate that can properly mobilize all the engineers of this country. We have many engineers who are not doing anything, who their skills are not used properly in this country. So we are asking a directorate to be created where all engineers come and they will put their heads together so that we can have value for them, for the resources that we allocate to some of the projects, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when Wamalwa was talking, he talked of a National Irrigation Board. Unfortunately, National Irrigation Board
before I get to my left, let's have Honorable Gishimo. You will still get chance. The members who are in this list who have registered interest to speak, you still get a chance.
Thank you.
This goes up to the end, so you still get a chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity to rise and support the report by the committee. And I thank the chair and this committee for having done a splendid job. Mr. Speaker, dams play a pivotal role in this country in terms of water provision for both domestic and industrial use, and as well as for provision of water for irrigation. And that is actually in line with the government's agenda of the Big Four, that is food security. And what needs to be done is the maximization of this very scarce water resource called water. And like in Kirinyaga, we have a dam called the Diva Dam, which is being constructed in Geshogo constituency. But the effect and the target benefit is the lower part of Kirinyaga, that is Mwea, for rice irrigation. And Mr. Speaker, what I've realized is that one of the areas that when these projects are being constructed, we need a very good environmental impact and assessment report. Because when I went through the report that was constructed for Diva Dam, it indicated that the effects on the local community surrounding the dam was of negligible factor to the persons who prepared the report. But we have seen, while the dam is being constructed, there are so many negative and adverse effects to the local community, including some houses and schools around developing cracks because of the high sounds that are developed while the construction is being done. So these are some of the areas that anybody who is tasked with the mandate of preparing those reports should look into, because we are seeing a likelihood of conflict between the locals and the contractors, because their rights have to be taken care of. Another issue is the CSR. Actually, these dams, and according to the Constitution, which mandated the enactment and legislation of an act under Article 71, which led to the Environment Management and Coordination Act, the local community must also benefit. So it must be taken into account that across and around Viva Dam, the local community, through the NIB, which is the primary government agency, should be considered in terms of making that there are projects that also benefit the local community or the natural resources being utilized. Mr. Speaker, another area that needs to be looked at is the easement of the bureaucracies when government is doing projects and ensuring that the contractors, the tax exemptions that are required are fast-tracked. Like in Viva Dam, we took about 6 months following up on the list of exemption from taxations, which has really delayed the construction of the dam. So the government should not be an impediment to its own projects when it comes to tax exemptions and those bureaucratic procedures, including PVOCs and those kind of stuff. Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, I would like to say that where corruption has been detected in construction of any projects, not only dams in this country, the government through EACC should move with speed so that it can arrest situations that can cause loss of public funds through corruption and other means. Mr. Speaker, I do support the report, and thank you for the chance.
We shall now have Honorable Hurufo. Order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support adoption of this report. I'm also a member of this committee. We have tried our best to visit as many dams as possible. Of course, we were constrained. Some of the dams which we wanted to visit didn't fall under our committee, and that is why one of the recommendations which we have made as a committee is such that all water-related works be put under one ministry and there be a directorate to deal with dams. Mr. Speaker, if we look at our observations, there are some observations which we made. One of the key ones, which I would like to talk about, is generally poor funding of water sector by Treasury. And this has actually forced us as a country to go for expensive loans through this funding model we are calling EPCF, where a private entity, most of the times an entity which is not a Kenyan entity, actually does the engineering work, does the procurement work, and it also seeks for financing. And therefore, as a country, our government may not be in a position to do proper due diligence, and we end up with a situation like the one we have found out with the case of Itare, where a company which in its own home country is actually bankrupt has been given a multi-billion contract to do a pan in our country. Another thing which we have also seen is that even when we look at our own engineers, the Ministry of Water, which we oversight, we realize that there are times, particularly when the design is poorly done, and as a result of that, the dams are poorly sited. The site of dams have to be changed, as for example in the case of Badasa, after millions, hundreds of millions of shillings has gone into construction. Sometimes we have delays as a result of problems related to land acquisition, where contracts are entered into, companies are contracted, and they cannot begin the work because the landowners, be they private or communities, are not ready to give their land for the projects. And this arises out of two main reasons. We realize that some of these big ponds are constructed in one place, and yet the water is meant for use elsewhere. And therefore, the local community may not willingly give up the land. For example, most of the mega ponds which is meant to supply water to the city of Nairobi is located in neighboring counties of Murang'a, Kiambu, and so on and so forth. And therefore, for the local farmers who are displaced, they may not find a good reason why they should give up their land unless they are compensated adequately for water to be supplied for people who live elsewhere. And this is why we are insisting in our recommendations. We have one of the key recommendations we have made is for interministerial committee to deal with the issue of siting, the issue of engaging communities, the issue of discussing compensation and acquisition of land before design is made. It makes, it defeats logic that we can go into contract and actually give contract to a company to do a dam when the land is not available. That will be the first step. Locating of the dam, where the appropriate location of the dam and whether that land is available should be the first thing before we engage. And therefore, because I'm running short of time, maybe one of the key recommendations which I think we need to emphasize is the importance of funding water sector adequately. I think this House has responsibility of approving budget. I really want to appeal to my colleagues to make sure that at the time when we are budgeting, because water is an enabler for all other sectors, we actually allocate enough resources to water sector so that we can do away with this very expensive mode of financing, which does not.
Your time is gone. Honorable Nagabo, Janet.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuongelea juu ya hii ripoti ya kutoka katika kamati ya mazingira katika bunge letu hili. Mimi pia nataka kuungana na wenzangu kushukuru kamati hii Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu imekuwa kwa muda haya mambo ya mabwawa katika nchi yetu ya Kenya yameleta utatanishi mno. Na haingekuwa hii kamati kuchukulia hiyo nafasi, Mheshimiwa Spika, hatungejua kwamba ni nini inaendelea katika mabwawa hizi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka kuungana na wenzangu wale wamesema kwamba haya mambo ya mabwawa ilikuwa ni chini ya kamati ya kilimo katika nchi yetu. Na ni ukweli hatungelijua ni nini inaendelea. Namshukuru mwenyekiti na timu yako kwa kutembea na kutambua kwamba hizi shida zenye wabunge wamesema katika bunge hili ni kweli ni shida zile ziko kule chini, na haikukuwa ni makosa ya wale walikuwa wanauliza, mbali ilikuwa ni makosa ya mipangilio sambamba kuhusu haya mambo ya mabwawa. Mheshimiwa Spika, umesikia hata kule Budalangi vile wamesema. Ni ukweli tusipokuwa na wataalamu wa kwenda kutambua kwamba hii bwawa linatakikana litoke wapi na liliende wapi, unaona kwamba tutakuwa tunamaliza wakati wetu na hizo pesa zenye zinatolewa katika serikali zitakuwa zinaangulia patupu. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiona sehemu za Turkana mahali penye wamesema, hiyo ni sehemu kame Mheshimiwa Spika. Na iwapo utatuma mtu ama mtu aseme kwamba amepewa kondarasi ya kwenda kujimba kisima ama bwawa katika eneo hilo, Mheshimiwa Spika, asiyekuwa na ujuzi utaona kwamba tutakuwa tunamaliza wakati wetu. Na mshukuru Mheshimiwa Chachi wamesema hapa, Mheshimiwa Spika, kwamba kuna wale walikuwa wamepewa fedha ya kutengeneza power, na unaona karibu 70% mtu amekula na uchapata kwamba amefanya kazi. Na ndipoza naungana na hii kamati kusema kwamba Auditor General ama nini wa hesabu katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, mwandishi wa hesabu achukulie hiyo hatua, tuhakikishe kwamba mtu akipewa kazi lazima akamilishe hiyo kazi. Hatuwezi kusema kwamba wananchi hawajajitokeza. Wananchi wako tayari katika sehemu zao, na hawa wabunge kwa sababu ni wawakilishi wa hao wananchi, hawana budi kwamba wakiona kwamba power inakuja katika sehemu zao, hao wako na nafasi ya kuongea na hao wananchi na kuhakikisha kwamba power ama nini mzuri inaletwa katika sehemu zao. Mheshimiwa Spika, hatutakuwa tunaachia tu tuseme kwamba waziri fulani ama hii kandarasi itolewe na mtu fulani, kwa sababu hawa ni wale tu, kwa sababu wanatembea kutoka kwa maji, wakitoka kwa maji wanaenda katika mahospitali kuhakikisha kwamba hawa wanajinufaisha hawa wenyewe binafsi, na sio kwamba wananufaisha wananchi wale wameongojea huduma zetu kama wabunge. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka kusema vile kamati imefanya, nataka tukue kwamba tuna mipangilio ya kuhakikisha kwamba serikali za counties, kwa sababu mambo ya maji iko katika serikali za counties, nao wakuwe na mipangilio mzuri kushikana na serikali kuu kuhakikisha kwamba hao wananchi wanapata haki yao, tunapata mapawa zile zinazaidia watu wetu kwa ajili ya kilimo na hata kwa ajili ya manufaa ya hao wananchi. Kwa haya machache, Mheshimiwa Spika, anasema asante na ninaunga kamati.
Honorable Kwenya is a member present.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to add my voice to this report. And from the onset, I want to pass my congratulatory message to the chair and his team of committee members of Water and Environment and Natural Resource. And from the title of the report is that it's an inquiry into the status of dams in Kenya. I would have expected that the report would have captured both present, historical, and futuristic in nature in terms of the proposed dams, so that then we have a report that is surely an inquiry into the dams status in Kenya. I happen to come from a constituency whereby we are host of a dam that serves Nairobi, that is Asumwa Dam. And it is interesting that we are some of the people who are suffering some serious historical injustice, because the water comes from my constituency, yet my constituencies do not enjoy the same water. This is an issue that needed to be addressed, and I hope that the chair, because he's seated within the chambers, he'll be able to take it forward and see how best we can do, so that then we do not get a resource from a certain constituency or a certain county, and the same people are not benefiting from the same resource. And Mr. Speaker, there are many recommendations that have been made by this committee, and which I support, especially recommendation on formation of Directorate of Dam Engineering. This is very important, because what you see is that most of these projects is like the old saying whereby you put the horse before the cart. They are not well thought out. So what comes into the mind of the initiators of these projects is how they are going to benefit as persons, and therefore forget about the millions of people who would benefit from those projects once they are well thought out and implemented. Directorate of Dam Engineering would reduce the cost of bidding, whereby we expect to get a bidder who is going to design and then construct and commission the same. If we have our own designs, in-house designs, we are going to reduce the cost and the time that the implementation takes. Mr. Speaker, there is also the issue of land compensation, and this is what I'm talking about, putting the horse before the cart. Because you see, we procure projects having not adequately compensated land owners. In my own constituency today, there are proposed dams. There is Keja Dam, and there's another one that is called Upper Chania. They are all proposed, but nothing is happening on the ground in terms of land compensation, so that then once the contractor sets in, he will have no hurdles in implementing the same. Mr. Speaker, this is something that really needs to be well thought out, something that we need to debate as a House, so that then we do not have a situation whereby we are contracting before these have been done. The other issue is the issue of bureaucracies. You find that there are a lot of infighting within government sagas. Like if a project is being done in my constituency, you see we have to get clearance from NEMA, clearance from Kenya Forest Service, Kenya Wildlife Service, you know, and we get all manner of back and forth, and therefore delaying the implementation of these projects. Finally, Mr. Speaker, you know, water is an economic social right, and a social right that is envisaged in our Constitution. If you read Article 43, Sub-Article 1 and Part D, it is a right for every Kenyan to access clean water in adequate quantities. But now we see the kind of funding that we're giving the Ministry of Water is not commensurate with the demand that is on the ground. And therefore, as a House and as one arm of the government, we need to relook into our budgets and make sure that we increase allocations for water. Like now when we have this pandemic of COVID-19, it is so serious that many homes cannot access clean water. Not even in rural areas, even in Nairobi. We really need to rethink and see what it is, how best we can fund water. Maybe after education and health, the next to be funded should be water. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish to support the report and hope that the chairman will look into the issues that members are raising, because I thank him because of sitting in the chambers when we are debating this. We don't see this coming from any chairman of these committees, and therefore I wish to congratulate.
Honorable Boere.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to congratulate the committee and myself, who is also a member, for a job well done. You have noted the report is too comprehensive, and we had made Kenyans to know first the dams were procured in the process to show a failure. It is through this report that Kenyans can now know that the government entered into a very expensive financial model. It is through this report that Kenyans can know that constructing a dam in Kenya is too expensive. As my colleague has earlier indicated, I also had opportunity to attend a water conference in Egypt. To our surprise, doing a multi-purpose dam in Egypt cost around 6 billion in comparison with the same in Kenya, which serves as a single source over 30 billions. In Egypt, for example, a dam which is done at 6 billion and done by the local engineers serves for irrigation, serves for Kenya, for power generation, serves for local water consumption, and they have even constituted a water police in Egypt to take care of the dams. Dam in Egypt, even the community lives around and they enjoy the benefit of water in such a dam. So we have also noted that, for example, in Kenya, there's no equity in dams distribution, and we can say they are designed to benefit particular regions. I want to give, for example, Korikosoin Dam, which the government approved. It has even taken years even for approval, and it is only one of its kind in that region. So the report is quite elaborative. We have also noted in the report of issues of bankruptcy from a farm in Italy, which raised a lot of questions. Because when financial procuring is done or evaluation, a company cannot just come bankrupt within 1 year from the commencement of work, because we believe in procuring of contractors for such a farm. Financial evaluation must be taken in consideration, which entails the cash flow and also property investment, which now combined brings financial soundness, which qualifies a company to be awarded. But in this case, we were surprised. Was it in evaluation? Was it only a cash flow? Was the capital investment taken into consideration? But because if capital investment is taken into consideration, then a company cannot just be bankrupt within a very short time, less than a year. We have also made Kenyans to know that contracts for construction of dams were done and awarded without consideration of the land issue where the dam is to be constructed. For example, Karimenuto, where a contract was awarded, over 7 billion paid as down payment.